why he's one of my favorites. This is Constantine. This is Constantine on a horse just outside of the entrance of St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. Now, Constantine was having quite a battle, the same as the other before him, trying to keep the empire together. And it was just before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine got down on his knees at sunrise, facing the sun, on his knees praying to Mithra, the Roman sun god. And as he prayed to Mithra, the Roman sun god, at the rising of the sun, he said he saw the sign of the cross, which is really not any big newsflash. Anyone that looks at the sun at sunrise is going to have to squint, and when you squint, you will always see a cross, because that's the way that light diffracts. However, he said he heard a voice that said, "In this sign, conquer." In the sign of the cross. Constantine, in a flash, in just a moment, then understood how to keep the empire together. He made a new church-state religion, an empire-wide universal religion, and in doing so, when he made this church-state one-world religion, even the Encyclopedia Britannica tells us that his empire became Christian overnight without one single conversion. It was just the stroke of a pen. And it was Constantine, who was praying to Mithra, who got this revelation, "In this sign conquer," and Constantine then began to bring the people together under his umbrella. Now, to do it, we have to introduce this individual, and this is the statue of Mithra. This, by the way, is in the Pope's Museum, the Vatican Museum, and I need to tell you a little bit of a background on this particular statue and who this is. To do this, we have to go back very quickly back to Babylon. Nimrod began his one world government empire in Babylon. It was an economic, a political, a religious world government system in which he was worshipped as God. Now, Nimrod was killed. His body was hacked into pieces. His body parts spread throughout the land of Shinar, which should have, in effect, ended the worship of Nimrod. But Semiramis, his wife, said Nimrod really didn't die. He ascended up into heaven and has now become the sun god. And so, the priest of Nimrod then divided the year up into the 4 quadrants of the solar calendar. The winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, the days in the year of equal daylight and equal darkness. Winter solstice, summer solstice, vernal, autumnal equinox. Amen. And the priest of Nimrod put in place a worship system in which Nimrod was worshipped as the sun god. Now, quite a bit later, Semiramis becomes pregnant because she said the rays of the sun, her dead husband Nimrod, impregnated her, and now she is going to bring forth the reincarnated Nimrod, and his name is going to be Tammuz. He is delivered at the time of the winter solstice on the ancient Babylonian calendar before the precession of the equinoxes. It was December 25th. Now the winter solstice is around the 21st of December, just because of the precession of the equinoxes. But at that time, December 25th, that was the shortest day of the year, and that was the birthday of Tammuz, the reincarnated Nimrod. Now Tammuz was, like his father, a great hunter. And here you see him as he is slaying the bull by hand and with a knife. And Nimrod was a great hunter. Tammuz, the reincarnated Nimrod, also a great hunter. And what happened in Tammuz's 40th year, he was gored to death by a wild boar in a freak hunting accident, and he died. And so the worshipers of the sun god, the reincarnated sun god, Tammuz, then set aside 40 days of weeping for Tammuz, 1 day for each year of his life, in which the sun god worshipers would deny themselves a pleasure in this life for the pleasure of Tammuz in his afterlife. Now, Quite a while later, Semiramis dies. And she is immediately ascends into heaven, and the gods send her back to earth on the first Sunday after the vernal equinox, because Sunday is when the sun god was worshipped. And so they send her back to earth on the first Sunday after the vernal equinox in this giant egg, which plummets down to the earth, lands in the Euphrates River, breaks open, and out emerges Semiramis, reincarnated as Easter, the bare-breasted fertility goddess. She turns a bird into an egg-laying rabbit, and then the priest of Easter, at the Easter sunrise service every year, would impregnate virgins on the altar of Easter, which I'll show you some photographs in a few minutes. And then, a year later, they would sacrifice those 3-month-old babies and dye the eggs of Easter in the blood of sacrificed babies. Now, what the Babylonian sun god worshippers did is then they stacked the 40 days of weeping for Tammuz to be the 40 days preceding when his mother was reincarnated as Easter. And so I believe down in New Orleans they called this, the day before the 40 days, they called Fat Tuesday, and in which they do this big sex orgy, right? And then they do the 40 days of weeping for Tammuz, which in New Orleans they call that what? Lent. And then on Easter Sunday, they would kill the wild boar that killed Tammuz and eat ham on Easter Sunday. Now, some of you, that sounds just a little bit too close to home, doesn't it? You know, we recognize some of these things in our own culture. But what happened at the Tower of Babel, when the languages were confused and the nations were divided into 70 nations with 70 different major language groups, at that time, the worship of Tammuz, then when it moved into Persia, became the worship of Mithra. When the Roman soldiers conquered the Persian army, they took on the worship of Mithra, and that's why Mithra became the Roman sun god. And you can read about it in your Encyclopedia Britannica. You can find out that the birthday of Mithra and Tammuz is both December 25th, at the time of the winter solstice on the Babylonian calendar. So here you see Mithra. Here's another shot of Mithra. And notice the cap that he's wearing. This is what's called the Phrygian cap. I always try to keep one of these handy with me if I'm in America around the month of December. So I keep one of these handy in case I need to pick up a few extra bucks at the mall on the weekends. Actually a part-time job. But this is the Phrygian cap. This is the official headwear of both Tammuz and Mithra. And here we see it's a completely different statue than the one you see here. But again, the same themes are there, both from the Vatican Library. Now, this is the coin of Constantine. This coin was minted after Constantine became the so-called first Christian emperor. Now, this is important to understand, ladies and gentlemen, because when Constantine started this new religion, he forbid anything Jewish in his religious system. Anyone who kept the Jewish Sabbath, he called it, not the Lord's Sabbath, what the Bible calls it, but the Jewish Sabbath, they would be cut off. Anyone who kept any of the feast of the Jews, as he called them, would be cut off. From then on, everyone was to celebrate all the pagan feasts and festivals, but they did them under different names or under different pretenses. This is the coin of Constantine, however, after he became the first Christian emperor. On the obverse, or the head side, is Constantine, his image and superscription here. And on the back side, I show this to people and ask, who is this? Here you see the image of a man, and you see a halo, or the rays of the sun, coming out of his head. You see he's got the whole world in his hands, and according to the Encyclopedia Britannica Junior, his birth date is December 25th. I ask people, who is this? And most people in America say, well, that must be Jesus, because Constantine is the first Christian emperor. Well, The superscription reads, Sol Invictus to Committee, committed to the invincible sun, Sol Invictus Mithra. Constantine was a worshiper of Mithra till the day that he died. And Constantine was the one that said that if anyone keeps the Jewish Sabbath or any of the Jewish festivals or feasts, they would be cut off. They would be executed. So he got rid of everything Jewish out of his religion, including the Jewish Messiah, and he introduced another Jesus. His name was called Tammuz, it was called Mithra, but now he's introduced somebody else, and this is where it gets very interesting. This is the Arc de Triomphe in Orange, France. I was there about a year and a half ago, and we made a wrong turn to find this Arc de Triomphe. When the Roman soldiers conquered Orange, France, they put this triumphal arch up at that time. This dates back to over 100 years before the birth of Yeshua. Now, on this arch, you see the battle standards and the shields of the Roman army. Do you notice something interesting about this? I will highlight it for you. The cross of Mithra is decorating the battle standards for over 100 years before the birth of Yeshua. Here is another scene, and we can see again the same crosses. Now these are so badly eroded you can no longer make out any crosses on them, but I would imagine that they're there. See, the early church fathers told Constantine, why are you trying to make us feel all warm and affectionate toward the cross? We know that the cross is nothing but the cross of Mithra, which has been the battle standards of Rome for over 4 centuries. But yet, it's Constantine who is bringing this into his universal religious system. One of my favorite places. I couldn't wait to get here. This is St. Peter's Cathedral. This is by far the most glorious edifice that's ever been built to the glory of mankind. Now, one of the things I wanted to get a photograph of, I could only get this close, so excuse me as we go in with the telephoto lens, and to pick up the statue of Peter. And here you see Peter with the halo, the solar nimbus here. We have another shot of him where he's doing this sign with his fingers. And what they don't tell you about this particular statue that I really wanted you to see is, first of all, is that so many people have kissed his foot through the centuries that it actually has worn away his brass foot. This statue is all brass. And if you can imagine the tender lips of the people kissing this foot until it's actually worn away the toes. Now, what they don't tell you when you're on the tour there is that this is the actual statue of Jupiter that was in the Greek pantheon before it was removed from Greece and put in Rome in St. Peter's Cathedral. It's literally the statue of Jupiter, which according to the Greek legend was born on December 25th. Now, I want you to look at this for just a minute, taken with a small camera. This is not wallpaper, people. This is gold. It is marble. This is really a magnificent building. And when you look at it from the inside, you are just awestruck with this. I am just standing in one place and I am panning around taking pictures at these different areas. Do you know how that was built? To pay into the building fund to build St. Peter's Cathedral, if you paid a certain amount into the building fund, you get a slip of paper called an indulgence, which would allow you to commit a sin in the future for your payment into the building fund. To build this magnificent building, all you had to give was $2.37, and you could rape a virgin. For a little over double, you can murder someone. That's how this was built. $2.37, rape a virgin sometime in the future, present your indulgence, and it's taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is the kingdom of heaven, if this is the true gospel, If this is the real Yeshua, then send me directly to hell.
Amen.
But yet, most of the traditions that we have inherited have come right straight down the line from this. Now, don't be offended because I'm telling you this. Be offended because this is reality. So, we are going to ask the real Jesus to please stand up. Now, I put Jesus in quotes here because it may interest you to know that over the last